the show that shows you how to do all the classy effects that you see in Hollywood. So today we're going to show you how to do a simple material setting on the Link model that we rigged the last time, so if you remember that. Again, we're using Blender 3D, and if that is like really overwhelming for you, Blender Guru is amazing. He'll show you the basics of Blender. After we do the simple materials on our Link character from Wind Waker, we will then show you how to do passes in Blender Cycles, which is always helpful. And then we're going to take the passes and composite them in After Effects. Yeah!
I have no idea what you just said, because I don't do Blender.
Well, I will show you! Yay!
Yay!
Alright, well, again, to follow along, hopefully you have the Link asset files. Let's open the Blender file with the rigged Link that we rigged in the previous episode. Alright, so let's go up to our material settings and click material, and as we can see they look exactly like they do in shaded mode. This is pretty boring. Let's click use nodes. So here's our nodes. What are nodes, you ask? Nodes have pipes and they have these little boxes or objects called nodes. Nodes have inputs and outputs. So I could say I want this node's output to go into this node's input. Do nodes make sense? The answer with that is obviously no. They don't make sense, they will never make sense, and that's okay. If you realize this, you can start making sense of nodes. With this said, I want to remind you that again, I'm not going to go over the basics of Blender Cycles. I'm going to assume that you already have a pretty good grasp of Blender Cycles. If you don't, go to Blender Guru. Alright. What I will be doing is showing you how to set up the materials in general for the Link model. So let's get started. Alright, I'm going to select the default Cycles material, click Use Nodes. Now I'm going to add an image texture. Once I have this image texture, I'm going to plug its output into the Diffuse node. Now, we should probably go and click Open on the image texture, and what this will do is allow us to select an image that we want to be mapped to our Link model. Luckily, Link is already pre-mapped, so that takes out a lot of problems. I actually despise mapping. If I don't have to do it, I won't. Now, let's select the basic texture from our asset files. It's the one that looks a little weird. It has Link's little pendant in it and some clothes. That's the basic texture. I'm not going to go over what texture is what. You can find out by playing around with different textures and seeing which one actually fits the Link model. Alright, I'm going to repeat this process for all of the other textures up until the mouth and the sword. And the reason why is because there's three textures that all use that exact same basic texture. Alright, let's set up our mouth texture. So same thing, add the texture node, go to our mouths and select something interesting. This one right here looks interesting. Look, he's all like, grrr, I don't want to be on a tutorial, I should be fighting. I should be fighting and save Zelda. Zelda, I need to save you, good for Gotham. Alright, so let's go on to the Link Eye. Let me rename Link Eye, because before it just said EYA. Okay, so add your image texture as well. Go and add the eye. Look at that. In your materials, when you view your object as materials, it looks so pretty. Huh, he looks great. I can see. So let's move on to passes. Just kidding, we can't move on to passes. We're only viewing this in the material setting. We need to look at the render setting in Cycles to make sure everything's correct. With that said, I do not have a world set up in Cycles, so let's tweak around with that. Go to your world setting, and what you want to do is make the background an image. To do this correctly, we want to hit Use Nodes. Now, in the node graph, go to your little world icon and add a new node. not any node, we need to add the environment image or environment texture. After you do that, click open and go and click on our HDRI image in the link assets. And that's about it for setting up your image, your world image machine that will take over everyone. Good job. Don't kill everybody. I mean, that's a bad thing. Alright, now click the render button on your view options, and you see here's our link model. But look, we have a problem. If I zoom in on the ice here, we can see that there's a weird shadow out of nowhere being cast where the eyes are. Let's go into edit mode. Let's L select, click, and move our eyes out. There it is. These eyes are actually not connected. They're mapped onto another mesh or object inside of our mesh. So instead of remodeling everything, what we can do is a matte. We can matte the eyes, so only the eyes are being visible. Well, let me just show you. Alright, here we have our nodes for the eyes, and what I'm going to do is spread them out, give myself a little bit of room, because I'm going to add some things here. Okay, first comes our mix shader, and let's put this in between the render and the diffuse. Now, to diffuse, we should connect its output to the mix. Let's also get in here a transparent node and drop that on there. Now, if we look at our link character, this doesn't do anything. There's a factor set on the mix that says 0.5. We can think of this as 0% and 1 being 100%. 0.5 just means it is having the texture show up from the diffuse by 50% and the transparent show up 50%. So this is not very helpful. So we'll have to do some extra work. Alright, so let's add another image texture. Open up our matte. There's actually an eye matte that I created for you guys just to make everything easy. If you don't have an eye matte, just create one in Photoshop or on an iMac, because it's an eye matte. Oh, it's funny. Okay, so with that said, let's plug this into our factor, this new texture, and go back and look. See, unfortunately, nothing happened here. And the reason why is factor it can't just take a black and white image and say, oh, I know what to do here. So you have to add some nodes to make sure that the factor is reading white as transparent and black as solid. Alright, let's add a color ramp and a mix node. Alright, we can leave the color ramp exactly where it is, just because we don't need to play around with this. It's a black and white image. We don't need to crush the whites or the blacks because they're as strong as they can be. Okay, now, on our mix node, select add, then on our colors, change them to black. And the factor of the mix node you want to punch up all the way to 1. Now, take the output of the color ramp, plug it into the input. Wow, that is a freaking mouthful. Why does this work? I don't know. I got this tip, actually, I think, from Blender Guru, who explains it much better than I do. But regardless, this works. Let's check it out. Alright, so there's still a problem here. We have the transparent working, but it's only working in the area that we actually want to show the eye. So the eye part is transparent and the skin is fully opaque. This is a problem. Well, we can simply fix that by going back into the nodes and looking at the color ramp. You see you have black on the left side and white on the right side. Well, this obviously says, hey, I'm going to take the darks and make them black, I'm going to take the lights and make them white, and everything between here is gray. Since we have a black and white image, we have no grays, there's only black and white. Obviously what it's doing is it's saying white is opaque and black is transparent. So what we want to do is just flip it. Take our black slider, put it all the way in the back, take our white slider, put it all the way in the front, and we have now flipped the image. We've made black white and white black, so if we go back, Yep, there it is. Our eye is completely opaque, and the skin is transparent. Sweet! Haha! Did it! Okay, I seriously hope I'm using the correct term of opaque, because I have no idea. Alright, now I'm going to go through and just spiff up all of my textures. One way to do so is to create a poor man's bump map. I say poor man's because I could go into a program and make a bump map or a normal map, but instead of that, so I'm going to take our original texture, add a mix node, change both of the colors to white, get the output of our texture node, and put it into one of the color inputs of the mix node. It doesn't matter necessarily which one, just know that whatever one you plug it into, 1 or 100% will be completely bumped, and 0 will be no bump, or it's going to flip this. I always forget which is which. Just play around with it and see what you get. Alright, so I'm also going to spiff up some of my other textures by adding that same bump map and a mix shader, and mix my diffuse, which has my texture on it, with a glossy shader, because I want to get more of a, I don't know, let's say Super Smash Brothers gloss on their little statues or something. But again, play around with your shaders and make them look how they should look. And now we're going to do this to all of the textures that we have set up. Alright, super time lapse, go. Alright then, well, if we're looking at this looks all pretty classy and pretty cool, but we need to still set up the textures for the sword, which is very similar. The only difference in setting up the sword is that we're going to apply a lot more gloss to the sword because you want it to be shinier, but still keep some of those textures in there. So go through, find the textures that belong to the sword, and apply them. Hopefully you'll see the original image that I created, and you'll be like, oh, this texture fits this texture. One texture I will be going over in detail, though, is the Triforce crest on the sword itself, because we have to set it up very much like we did with the eye texture. The only difference is there actually is no matte. The first way I showed you how to do the eye texture and take things out and make something transparent was with a matte. This texture just has a transparency layer. There's alpha in the image itself. Well, Blender can use this too. Woo! I think this is a new feature because 3 years ago I was not able to do this. Like before, go to Converter and add a color ramp, as well as go to Color and add a Mix node. Set Mix to Add, set both colors to black. Again, plug the converter's output into the adds input. Make the factor 1. Plug the factor into our mix shader. In the mix shader, you should have an emission. Now this is new. We're going to use an emission node and a transparency node. And let's see what we get. Okay, as we can see, again, for some reason, the alpha is switched. So let's go to our converter node, flip black and white, and the Hyrule, Triforce should come through. Oh, now doesn't that look nice? Okay, so earlier I had moved my armature to layer 2, just like I have my camera and my light on layer 9. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring all these up, and let's pose our link model so we have a really cool, interesting pose. And I'm doing this by just pressing G and R for rotate and moving all these bones around where I need them to be. And we're going to use this for our passes. Alright, so let's look at creating render passes in cycles. Alright, let's go to our Render Passes tab in the right column there. And something that we want to turn on is first Diffuse, click Direct, Indirect, and Color. Do the same for Glossy and Transmission. Then we want to turn on Emit, click that little tab there, as well as Shadow. And Ambient Occlusion. We want Ambient Occlusion on. Now all of these will appear in our node editor. In our node editor, we should also be in the renders layer instead of the materials. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the composite node. I'm going to press Alt-H to hide its inputs. I'm going to add a reroute node. I'm also going to add me a viewer node. I'm going to do the same thing with this. Plug the reroute into the viewer. Now, mainly our primary image is going to our viewer and our composite node. Now, what the composite node does is whenever you export something from Blender regularly, that composite works as the basic output. And in our renders layer node, we have image. Image is all the passes combined. The reason I leave this the way it is mainly because I want to know how Blender cycles internally will add everything together, and I really want that. So what I also did is created a frame to add my composite and my viewer, just so I can keep things a little bit more organized. So that's kind of nice, so I'm going to move this over there. We have a composite node here. Alright, so if we take a look at our output, it's set up to temporary. Now, we can actually change the output whenever we want, but first, let's create another, go to output, and then go to file output. Now, this is essentially going to be our passes. This node is very important. This kind of overwrites the original output in the render tab, so I'm going to change its color as well. And we can see that it has right now just one input, which is image. Well, let's change this. First, in the labels, I'm going to call it passes. Then I'm going to go down to image and type in alpha, because alpha is our first output of the render layer after image. Then I'm going to click the add input. It creates another one. And I'm going to call this one a shadow. And so you get the idea. I'm naming it shadow, AO, emit. Now for the diffuse and glossy and transmission shaders, we're going to change this a little bit. I'm just going to write in diffuse. We just need a diffuse here. We don't want to write in diffuse, direct diffuse, indirect diffuse color, because we're just going to create a diffuse pass from those three outputs. So create a gloss and then create a transmission, or just trans. I'm shortening all of these. The last one I'm going to call Z depth. I know we don't have a Z depth output on our render layer, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So plug the alpha into the alpha, plug the shadow into the shadow, plug AO into AO, plug emit into emit, and this is where things get interesting. How are we going to get direct, indirect, and color of our diffuse layers into diffuse? If I just try to combine it right there, as you see, all it does is switch inputs. So you can only put one output to one input. That's the way it works. So what we're going to do is go into the link assets and go into one of the saves, the finished saves. Then you're going to append. You're going to append something. What you want to append is the add, multiply, and Z depth groups. Once you've done that, if you go into your group setting, hey, look at that. We have add, multiply, and, Z depth. So this is what this is doing. I figured this out by going onto blender.com and looking at compositing, but we have an add. So we're adding our direct and indirect, and then we're multiplying the color with what we added together. So that's all this group is doing. It's not too crazy. Again, direct, indirect are added. Then color is multiplied by the other two. So if we click out of that, we can see that I've labeled them direct, indirect, and color. So we're going to plug direct into direct, indirect into indirect, and color into color. Then we're going to grab its output and put it into the diffuse, and that's all you need to do for the other three. It's really not horribly difficult. So let me duplicate that, and again, since it's straightforward, I'm just going to plug the indirect and the direct and the colors in where they need to be. And I'm going to do this for glossy and transmission as well. Alright, and then we're going to put all these in there. Make sure I'm going to move these around just to make it look a little cleaner. Sweet. Now our last thing that we need to do is Z-depth. Okay, this one's a little bit more complicated. Z-depth is if you want to add, like, I don't know, post blur, like a rack focus blur. If you want to fake that in After Effects, you'll need a Z-depth, or if you want to add fog after the fact, you'll probably want a Z-depth pass. So let me move my camera around on my Link character to make sure it's centered up. Let's go back into my node area. And something I want to do is eventually I need to add another. I just need to make another render layer. So I'm gonna hit plus. I'm gonna call this Z-depth. And something else I'm going to do is change my material. I want everything in this render layer to be material. Now if you append a material, go to the finished product and append Z-depth anti-alias, type it in, and then you want to set Z-depth anti-alias to everything on that particular render layer. So let's go back to the nodes, duplicate the render layer, and let's, select the render layer that we just created, Z-depth. Cool. Alright, so now I'm going to change its color just so I know it's different from my original layer pass, and let's go to group and add Z-depth stuff. Okay, this is where some people get confused, and it is confusing. Just plug the image and make sure it is image. Plug image into value, and then its output into Z-depth. Now, if I hit tab in here, we can see that here's what it's doing. I'm not going to go over this. This is really in-depth. Pretty much, I have a normalize with a separate RGB to a set alpha to an alpha over, so it doesn't look goofy. And then we have a color ramp, and the color ramp essentially is doing exactly what the other color ramps are doing. It's setting white and black and black and white. So let me go and change my Z depth group here and move it over. And as we can see, if we want to change our Z depth values, we'll change the color ramp settings. Let me also create something interesting. Since we have two render layers, I want to be able to see them at the same time. To do that, simply I've learned to create a switch node. And what I like to do is make this kind of cleaner than most. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add about 3 different reroutes so I can have the output of my Z-depth stuff not only going into my passes, but also going into the viewer. And the compositor. Just remember, it will go into the compositor too. So, alright, so what we want to do is go to our render button and render just a temporary image out of Blender. And the reason we do this is because the backdrop in the nodes will only work if you have something it's looking at. So you just need to render a temporary image, and that's what it's going to put in the backdrop for our nodes. Now, once we have this done, we can go back into our nodes and tweak some things, play with some things. Again, something I want to stress is that you need to append the add to multiply group as well as the Z-depth group. If you don't, this doesn't work and you'll have to build them from scratch. The add to multiply is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Just get an add and a mix and combine the two. But the Z-depth pass is not. I don't remember straight how to do it by heart. I found it in another tutorial, and you can find the tutorial below. But it's just easier to append a group. So please append these groups. Alright, once we're done, we can now go back into our node tree. Hit tab to open up our Z-depth group, and remember that compressor or RGB converter, or was it the black and white color ramp? The color ramp. Essentially, it's a color ramp. Play with the color ramp to get the exact Z-depth that you want. This is depending on what you're going for. If you're going for fog, or if you're going for more like depth of field blur, you would really want to play with this. Now, remember, when you're done, when you're satisfied, what you want to do is you want to set your outputs on both the basic output in the render panel as well as the passes output. I keep mine the same. What I do is I call my overall output in the render tab, the one that the composite node will spit out, the composited 01. And then my passes, I don't call anything. I just set it to a folder. And the reason I do this is so it will take the name of the inputs that we gave it. Emit, shadow, diffuse, glossy, etc. Alright, another tip is try to make sure that your composite and your passes are rendering to the same folder. This makes everything interesting and easier. It's especially easier if you have a big project, let's say, and you need to export more than one animation for a bunch of different maybe live action shots or even just shots in a story that you've created that's an animation. What I like to do is to create a Blender folder with the shot number folder in it. So let's say I'm on shot 1, it will say shot 1 or 01 in Blender, and then within that folder will be another folder which maybe says link 01. If there's just going to be, you know, one Blender asset, you don't even have to have another subfolder. Just drop everything into the 01 or 02 or 3 or 4 folder that you created depending on shot. Besides that, let's go over here and I have my frame range between 1 frame and 1 frame, and the reason why is because I don't have an animation, because I didn't want to spend the time to make an animation. But if you want to create an animation, please do. By doing that, you just move your playhead in the future, move the rig, press I, and then start keying your bone configurations. But if not, that's cool. Just make sure you click animate at the very end of it. Now, alright, before I click animate, I want to make sure I have all the layers on that need to be on, including the model layer as well as the camera and the light layer, because I'll need my light layer. Also, I'm going to set all of my samples to 50. 50 samples is pretty low. If you want something more realistic, set it a lot higher. If you're doing an animation and you only are using your CPU, which I am, because I'm using a older MacBook without an NVIDIA graphics card, it's using a AMD, but whatever. What you want to do is probably set it to 50. In an animation where you add motion blur in after the fact, you don't have to have it horribly high, the render passes. Now, if you want them to be high and more photorealistic, sure, wait a while. But if you're running on CPU, and you have maybe 10 seconds to go through of an animation that's 250 frames at 30 frames per second, give or take, you're going to be there for a really long time. It's probably going to take more than a couple of days. It will probably take 4 or 5 days for 10 seconds. Most of the time, I just don't have that kind of time, so my renders are pretty small. Alright, when you make sure all your settings are correct, just go ahead, click animate, and I'll see you in After Effects shortly to show you real quick how to composite this. Alright, let's open up After Effects. So this is not an After Effects tutorial. I will go over some other things in After Effects later, but with that said, let me just tell you how to really quickly start working with your 3D passes inside After Effects. What you want to do is import all of the passes, one as image sequences. So you should have an image sequence for your shadow, for your diffuse, for your glossy, for your emit, etc., etc., etc. So what I'm going in and doing first is just dropping my diffuse into a new composition, and I'll drop in my gloss and my AO, everything but the alpha, Yeah, just everything but the alpha. Now what you're going to do is you're going to play around with their modes. I'm going to set my glossy and my emit to screen or add because they're bright, they're highlights, while my AO and my shadow I'm going to set to multiply. The shadow I usually have to actually bump down even after setting it to multiply. I really have to set the shadow to an opacity of about like 40 or 20, depending on how dark you want it, because it's just straight like black, and I want it to be shadowy, not like completely black. After this, I'm gonna pre-compose all of that, so I can then drop my alpha on top of the pre-composed composition that I made, and set the map to Luma, because the alpha appears as just a black and white surface. Yay! Then I'm going to add my Z-depth layer, and I'm going to add some fog behind here, and then I'm just going to make a new layer for background and tweak all these settings, and what you got is a pretty rad image in After Effects. So sweet. Well, I'm glad that we showed you how to do a simple material setting on our Link character. Also glad that I showed you how to then composite the passes that we rendered out into After Effects. Yay! Jazz hands! So please, again, like anything else, show us what you create. Ask us any questions that you may or may not have. But create art. Also subscribe. If you like our tutorials.
Subscribe to all the channels where Film Stache will be on.
Yeah, all of them. There's like three. Three.
Yeah.
That's a lot. There's like 3 times the excitement.